The week before Christmas in Sudbury, Ontario, is the kind of cold that doesn't just chill you. It settles into your bones and stays there. The kind of cold that makes the walk from the parking lot to the pharmacy door feel like a punishment. Audrey Renshaw knew that walk well. She'd been making it for 3 years now, ever since everything fell apart, and somehow it never got easier. She was 38 years old and looked it in the way that women who carry too much alone always do. Not ugly. Just tired. Tired in the eyes, tired in the set of her jaw. Tired like someone bracing for the next thing to go wrong. Her coat was a dark olive green she'd bought at Value Village 2 winters ago, and the zipper on the left pocket had stopped working in October. She kept meaning to fix it. She kept not having the time. Her son, Elliot, was 7. He'd been running a fever since Tuesday. It was the 23rd of December. Inside the pharmacy, the fluorescent lights buzzed over rows of greeting cards and tinsel-wrapped chocolates and vitamin supplements promising to change your life for $39.99. Audrey moved past all of it without looking. She knew exactly what she needed. Children's ibuprofen, the dye-free kind, because Elliot reacted badly to the red one. She'd learned that the hard way last winter. A box of throat lozenges. Maybe cough syrup if there was anything left in the account. She pulled out her phone and checked her banking app for the 3rd time that day, the same way you press a bruise even though you know it's going to hurt. $212. That had to cover rent top-up, groceries until the 3rd, and the hydro bill that was already 11 days past due. She put her phone away. Elliot was at home with her neighbor, Mrs. Boudreau, an older francophone woman who watched him sometimes without being asked and never once mentioned money. Audrey had left him bundled under 2 quilts watching cartoons. His small forehead warm against her palm when she kissed him goodbye. He hadn't complained. He never did. That was the part that broke her a little every time. That her 7-year-old had already learned not to ask for too much. She found the ibuprofen on the 3rd shelf. The dye-free kind was 11.49. The regular was 7.99. She stood there for a moment, doing the math that she was always doing, the kind of math that had nothing to do with numbers and everything to do with consequences. She took the dye-free. At the back of the store, near the pharmacy counter, she picked up a box of throat lozenges. Honey and lemon, the ones that actually worked, and a small jar of vapor rub, that she hadn't budgeted for but felt she couldn't leave without. She carried everything in her arms because she hadn't grabbed a basket, and now going back for one felt like admitting defeat somehow. The line at the register was 3 people deep. It was 9:14 in the evening. Outside, snow was falling in the thick, lazy way it does in northern Ontario when it means business. Not flurries, not a dusting, but an actual accumulation that would need to be shoveled before 6 in the morning if she wanted to get Elliot to the walk-in clinic when it opened. She waited. She counted the items again mentally. Ibuprofen, lozenges, vapor rub, a small pack of children's throat spray she'd added at the last second because she remembered how much it had helped him last time. She calculated as she moved forward in the line. $29, roughly. Maybe 31 with tax. She could do 31. She reached the counter. The young cashier, maybe 19, wearing a Santa hat with the white trim half detached, scanned each item with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing it for 7 hours, and was counting the minutes until close. The display ticked upward. Audrey watched it. When the total appeared, something cold passed through her that had nothing to do with the weather outside. $37.42. She had done the math wrong. She hadn't factored in the throat spray, such a small thing. She stood there for a half second that felt much longer, running the calculations again in her head, knowing the answer was the same. "Do you want to remove something?" the cashier asked, not unkind. Just automatic. Audrey picked up the throat spray. It was the most optional of everything there, not a fever reducer, not a rub she could put on his chest at bedtime. She set it on the counter to the side. "Yeah, just not that one." The cashier voided it. The new total. $30.08. Audrey tapped her card. The machine beeped. She looked down at the small screen. The heat that rose to her face was immediate and total. The cashier glanced at the screen and then up at Audrey with the particular blankness of someone trying very hard not to react. The man behind her in line, middle-aged, basket full of wine and fancy chocolates and what appeared to be a very expensive cheese, shifted his weight. She could feel it. She could feel every inch of the 6 feet between them. "Do you want to try again?" the cashier asked. "Yes," Audrey said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. She tapped again. She knew it wouldn't work. She knew exactly what the problem was. She'd transferred $40 to her savings account that morning because she was trying. She was always trying to keep something set aside for emergencies, and she'd miscalculated what was left in checking. The irony of it was almost funny. She'd been saving for an emergency. And the emergency was right now. The machine beeped again. Declined. She exhaled through her nose. Can you hold these? I just need to. I have another card. She didn't. But she said it because the man behind her was now studying his phone with theatrical focus, and the woman behind him was watching openly, and the Santa hat was starting to blur a little at the edges, and she needed a moment, just one moment. She stepped to the side and opened her banking app with shaking hands. Transfer the 40 back. It would post overnight. It would be there tomorrow. It would not be there in the next 90 seconds. She stood there with her phone and her coat with the broken zipper. And she thought about Elliot at home with his fever, and about the snow outside that was already 4 inches deep, and about the fact that it was 9:15 on the 23rd of December, and she thought, not for the first time that year, I don't know how I'm going to do this. She was not a person who cried easily. She'd learned to keep it for the shower, for after Elliot was asleep, for the car on the way home from shifts at the hospital where she worked as a unit clerk. Not a nurse, not a doctor. Just the person who kept the paperwork moving, and the phone answered and the system running, invisible and essential. She did not cry in pharmacies. But her eyes were stinging, and she was blinking more than she needed to. Hey, the voice came from behind her, not the cashier, not the man with the cheese. A different voice, lower, unhurried. Sorry to interrupt. She turned. The man standing there was maybe 45, wearing a Carhartt jacket and a gray wool toque pushed back on his head. He had the kind of face that had spent a lot of time outdoors, weathered in a way that looked honest rather than rough. Work boots, not dress shoes. A small basket in his hand with 2 items in it. NyQuil and a bottle of orange juice. He was looking at her without pity, which was the thing she noticed first. Not sympathy, not the particular cringe of second-hand embarrassment. Just straightforward attention, like she was a person and he was a person and they were both standing in a pharmacy and something had happened. I got it, he said. He was already moving toward the counter. No. The word came out before she'd thought it through. No thank you, I'm fine, I just need to. My kid the same thing last year, he said, nodding at the items on the counter. Fever right before Christmas. It's rough. He said it like he was continuing a conversation they'd already been having. He set his basket down and looked at the cashier. Can you add hers to mine? You don't have to do that, Audrey said, and she hated how thin her voice sounded. I know, he said, simply, then quieter, just to her. It's not a big deal. Please. The cashier combined the transactions. The man. She didn't know his name, didn't know anything about him. Tapped his card without looking at the total. It went through on the first try. The Santa hat cashier handed the bag to Audrey. She took it. Her hands had stopped shaking, which surprised her. Thank you, she said. She didn't add anything else because there was nothing else that would have been adequate. He picked up his own small bag. NyQuil, orange juice. Your kid's going to be fine, he said. It was a strange thing to say maybe, but it didn't sound strange coming from him. It sounded like the kind of thing a person says when they mean it. She nodded. She had to look away. Outside, the snow was still falling. She found her car in the second row of the parking lot and sat in it for a moment without starting it. The pharmacy bag on the passenger seat. The heat not yet running. Through the windshield, the lights of the pharmacy sign blurred orange in the snow. She let herself feel it. Just for a minute. The relief and the shame and the gratitude and the grief that always seemed to come with gratitude these days. Because needing help was never simple. Not when you'd once been a person who didn't need it. Back before Marcus left, before the joint account was emptied, in ways she still didn't fully understand, before the apartment and the single income and the constant arithmetic of not enough. She started the car. Back at the apartment, Mrs. Boudreau had fallen asleep in the armchair with the television murmuring. Elliot was still on the couch, awake, clutching the worn rabbit he'd had since he was 2. His face was flushed but his eyes were alert. Did you get the medicine? He asked. His voice was hoarse. I got everything, she said. She sat on the edge of the couch and pressed the back of her hand to his forehead. Still warm but not worse. How are you feeling, bud? Okay, he said. Then, she smoothed his hair back from his face. Santa knows everything. Does he know we moved? The question landed quietly, the way his questions always did. Not loaded, just honest, because he was 7 and he didn't yet know to be careful with certain things. They had moved. 8 months ago from the house to the apartment. He'd been in the same school, same class, same friends, she'd made sure of that. But he knew they'd moved. Children always know. He does, she said. I updated him. Elliot considered this seriously. Then he relaxed back into the cushions. Okay. She gave him the ibuprofen with a small cup of water and the throat spray she hadn't had to leave behind after all. And she sat with him until his eyes got heavy and his breathing evened out. Then she cleaned up the kitchen. Dishes from dinner, a pot she'd been meaning to scrub for 2 days. And folded the laundry that had been sitting in the basket, and did all the small maintenance of keeping a life going that nobody sees. At 11:30 she sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and the quiet that only comes after a child is finally asleep. She thought about the man in the pharmacy. She tried to remember if she'd even gotten his name. She hadn't, she'd been too focused on not falling apart to ask. She thought about what he'd said. I know, as in, I know you didn't ask for this. I know you didn't want to need it, I know. Just those 2 words and somehow they'd contained everything. She pulled out her phone and opened her banking app again. She looked at the number, $212. It hadn't changed. It wouldn't change until the 30th, when the next paycheck landed. 7 more days of math. She put her phone face down on the table and drank her tea. Christmas Eve arrived gray and cold, the snow from the night before frozen now into a crust that crunched underfoot. Elliot's fever had broken sometime before dawn. By 8 in the morning, he was at the kitchen table eating toast and asking if they could watch the Christmas movies, the ones they watched every year. A specific order he'd established at age 5. And defended passionately ever since. She said yes. She made hot chocolate with the last of the cocoa powder, and a splash of vanilla. The way her own mother had made it, and they sat together on the couch under the quilt and watched animated reindeer and talking snowmen. And she felt for a few hours that things were going to be okay. At noon she got a text from a number she didn't recognize. Hi, this is Ray, from the pharmacy last night. I got your number from Denise at the front. Hope that's okay, she said she knows you. I wanted to make sure your kid was doing better. Also, I work at a heating company, Norwest Mechanical. I heard you mention to Denise that your building's boiler had been inconsistent. If that's still an issue, I can send someone to look at it after the holidays. No charge. Merry Christmas. She read it twice. She knew Denise. The older pharmacist who'd worked at that location for years, who always remembered which medication Elliot reacted to, who had once slipped Audrey a coupon without being asked. Of course Denise knew. Pharmacists in small cities always know more than you think. She sat with the text for a long moment. The boiler in their building had been running inconsistently since October. Some nights the heat was fine, others it knocked and shuddered and produced barely enough warmth to keep the pipes from freezing. She'd reported it to the building manager twice. She'd gotten 2 voicemails in return and no follow-up. She'd been sleeping with an extra blanket and keeping Elliot's door closed to hold the warmth in. She typed back, "Thank you, he's much better, and yes. That would mean a lot. Thank you again, for last night too. I'm sorry I didn't get your name." The response came quickly. "Don't be sorry, and don't mention last night. Merry Christmas, to you and your kid." She set the phone down. Elliot was watching the screen with his hot chocolate in both hands, the rabbit tucked under his arm. The apartment was small and the furniture was mismatched, and the Christmas tree was a 3-foot artificial one she'd bought at Dollarama, and decorated with ornaments Elliot had made at school. It was not the Christmas she'd imagined, years ago, when she was a different person in a different life. But Elliot's fever was gone. The medicine was in the cabinet. The heat, for now, was running. She looked at him. Really looked. The way you sometimes forget to when you're just trying to get through the day. And she felt the particular, gutting love of a parent watching a child be quietly happy. He hadn't asked for much this year. A book about space, a set of colored pencils, a board game they could play together. She'd managed all 3, found at discount and set aside over 3 months, wrapped in paper she'd saved, from a gift she'd received at work. He turned and caught her looking at him. "What?" he said. "Nothing," she said. "Just looking at you." He considered this. Then, "That's kind of weird, Mom." She laughed, and it was a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere in the chest. "Yeah," she said. "Maybe." That afternoon there was a knock at the door. She opened it expecting Mrs. Boudreau or the super or nobody. Instead, she found a cardboard box on the doormat, no markings, no label, just a folded piece of paper tucked under the flap. Inside the box, a tin of shortbread cookies from a local bakery she recognized, a bag of premium coffee, a gift card to the grocery store on Elm, a children's book about the Northern Lights that Elliot had circled in a library catalog months ago and mentioned once in passing, and a small envelope. She opened the envelope. The card was simple, cream-colored with a small sprig of holly. Inside, in blocky handwriting that looked like a person who'd learned to write with purpose rather than elegance. For Elliot. Merry Christmas. For you, you're doing a better job than you think. This place is lucky to have someone like you in it. No name. Just that. She read it 3 times. She was sitting on the floor of the hallway because she'd somehow ended up there, the box in her lap, the card in her hand. Elliot came padding over in his socks and looked at the box with enormous eyes. "Is that from Santa?" she said carefully. It might be from someone who was paying attention. He accepted this. He was at his core a practical child. He picked up the book about the northern lights and studied the cover with the focused expression he got when something interested him genuinely. "Can we read this tonight?" "Yes," she said. "Absolutely yes." They spent Christmas Eve eating shortbread and reading about auroras, and how they're caused by charged particles from the sun, colliding with gases in the atmosphere, which Elliot found deeply satisfying. She made soup from what was in the pantry, and they ate it at the kitchen table with the radio on, a station out of Sudbury that played carols until midnight. She thought about the man named Ray. She thought about Denise at the pharmacy, who'd known her well enough to hand over a phone number to a stranger she'd trusted. She thought about the particular web of small kindnesses that made up a community. Invisible most of the time, only visible when you needed it badly enough to notice. She'd grown up being told that cities were cold, that people didn't look out for each other, that you had to carry everything yourself. She'd believed it for a long time. She'd gotten very good at carrying. But she was starting to think the story was more complicated than that. In January, a crew from Norwest Mechanical came and fixed the boiler. The building was warm for the first time since October. She sent Ray a text to say thank you and he replied with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else, which for some reason made her smile. In February, she started volunteering twice a month at the food bank, 3 blocks from the hospital. She brought Elliot when she could. She wanted him to understand early what she was only now really learning. That the people who help are not always the ones with the most. Sometimes they're the ones who remember what it felt like to need it. One evening in late February, she was packing boxes at the food bank when a woman came through the door with 2 kids in tow. Both of them in coats that were just slightly too light for the weather, the kind of thing you notice when you've worn that coat yourself. The woman had the particular set to her face that Audrey recognized, jaw forward, eyes not quite meeting anyone's, holding it together by force. Audrey finished packing her box. Then she walked over. "Hey," she said. "Can I help you find anything?" The woman looked at her. Wary for a moment, then something loosened. "Me neither," Audrey said. "The first time, I mean. It's easy. Come on, I'll show you." She walked the woman through the shelves, pointing out which items ran low, on which days, where the kids section was, how the whole thing worked. It took 20 minutes. By the end, the woman's shoulders had dropped about 2 inches from where they'd started. At the door, the woman turned back. "Thank you. I don't even know your name." "Audrey," she said. The woman nodded. She looked like she might say something else, then just nodded again and left, her kids beside her, each of them now carrying a bag. Audrey stood in the doorway and watched them go. Outside, it was still February cold. Still the kind of cold that settles in and stays. But inside the food bank it was warm, and the boxes were full. And down the street the hospital was lit up as always. And her son was at Mrs. Bowdrow's being fed something with too much butter in it. And somewhere across the city a boiler was running that hadn't been running before. She went back inside and picked up where she'd left off. It turns out that the people who change your life don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they're just standing behind you in line at the pharmacy at 9:15 on a December night, with NyQuil and orange juice, and 2 words that contain everything. "I know."